What do we see on both sides of the highway? I don't know how many acres of cornfields on both sides as you're coming into town.
Empty homes.
Empty homes. Does he see dead bodies? Dead animals everywhere? Dead people? Maybe dead people. People starved to death. They're just laying because there's so much of it. People have died, okay? People have, and it doesn't tell us this, but in some cultures, they when they were laid under siege, when it got to the end of it, what would they do? They would start eating their own. They start cannibalizing their own people. That's how bad it would get. If there's a 3.5-year famine, 3.5-year drought, there is no rain. All the brooks have dried up. All the rivers have dried up. I've talked to Fred Lynch, and he sent me pictures of Canyon Lake, and it's a mess. It's horrible. And we see what Canyon Lake looks like. How some of the boat ramps are 50, 60, 70 yards out of the water. Okay? Yeah, Gerald.
Grass.
Absolutely. The land is devastated. And Elijah's going on this trek, and he's going to Ahab, and as he goes, and he's seeing this, what does he know? I did this. God and I did this. I wonder what Ahab's going to say when I get there. Wouldn't you think that? I wonder how mad Ahab's going to be. I wonder how bad this is going to be. And he said, so he gets up and he takes off and he starts going back. Got to go back and give him a message. Okay? I'm going to send rain. All right. Now, look at what happens. But the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. So what do you know about him? He's a palace administrator. He's a devout follower of God, but he's got to navigate through this administration that is completely and totally insane and corrupt. They worship Baal and they worship the Asherah. They have practiced all kinds of despicable stuff in their worships. Okay, now, and Obadiah, who is close, he is the administrator of the palace. Okay, while Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets. All right, so in this environment, what is Jezebel doing? She's killing all of God's prophets. All the prophets still loyal to God, she's killing them all. This is his wife. Not him, his wife. Okay? All right? You see the dynamic that Obadiah finds himself in? You see? It's going to be important when you get down just a little bit. All right? Now, listen to what he said. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 15 each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah, go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive so we will not have to kill any of our animals. So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. Let me ask you something. When's he concerned about his people?
No.
He's got an administration that's concerned about his animals. When's he going to be concerned about his people? His people are starving to death. When's he going to be concerned? Doesn't look like he is, does it?
It gets worse.
Yeah. Now, look, as Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, is it really you, my Lord Elijah? Yes, he replied, go tell your master Elijah is here. Okay? What have I done wrong? asked Obadiah. That you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death. As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. Okay? So, now, what's the dynamic in Samaria? What's the dynamic with Ahab and Jezebel? What's going on?
There's a manhunt.
There's a manhunt. He's a wanted man. All right? And who's protected him? God has. God's protecting him. Sent him to a woman's house who's got no food, got a sick son. Sends him to a brook and lets him be fed. He doesn't have to go out of the cave to find something to eat. The ravens come and feed him. God's protecting him in this 3.5 years while all of this nightmare is going on. And here's Jezebel and Ahab is consumed with finding this guy. He sent people all over. And so Obadiah said, look at what he said. He said, but now you tell me to go to my master and say Elijah's here. I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Has he seen this before?
Yeah.
He's seen it before.
Yeah.
He's seen someone say, "Oh, I don't know where Elijah is," and he didn't believe him. He killed him. Doesn't tell us that, but if you read between the lines, guys, how dreadful and how demonic what's going on here. It's awful. And God's sending Elijah. So when God sends you into the face of evil, understand something. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. Sometimes you're going to have to stand in the gap before the evil one, and God says, "I've got this. I'll take care of you. Just go do what I've asked you to do." All right? Now, he said, "Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, that what I did with Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah's here? He'll kill me." Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." He said, "I got this. I'll be there." Who's more courageous now? Who is courageous? You're going to see this change. In just a little bit, you're going to see it change. In the next chapter, it's going to change because Elijah's going to be running for his life, scared like a scared rabbit. Okay, over some woman that God could absolutely snap his fingers and be done with her. All right, now. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" That word troubler in the Hebrew can also be translated snake, asp, or viper. Okay? In some places that's how it's translated. You know what he's really saying? Is that you snake in the grass? You sorry snake. You ever thought about calling someone that? And if you call them that, what would it mean? What would it mean to call someone a snake? What would it mean if you called someone that?
They're an awful person.
They're an awful person. You know, they're like symbolically they crawl on their belly. That's how awful they are. That's what you'd be saying. That's what he says. He says you're a snake for what you've done to this country. Okay? He said you're a troubler of Israel. And here's Elijah. "I have not made trouble for the Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now some of the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." He said, "It wasn't my fault. I didn't do this. You did it." You ever had someone accuse you of doing something you knew good and well it was them that did it all along? I have dealt with a lot of marriages where one person is making an accusation against someone else, and I know because of the dynamic that's going on, I know it wasn't that. It was that person had done it all along, and that person's trying to save face, and so they're accusing the other partner of doing something that they're really the ones doing all along. And you know what happens in a relationship like that? It starts to implode. What has happened because of what Ahab and Jezebel have done in that country? Now, understand something. These people have witnessed abomination after abomination. They witnessed sacrificing of children. They witnessed the sexual perversion that's been involved with worshiping the Baals and the Asherah. They've witnessed that. So this has been a demonic, evil, gross place. And the people have just, okay. And they just kind of went along for the ride. And Elijah said, "You bring the people to Mount Carmel. You bring them, and you see what's going to happen." You know, and so, you know, it's easy. It gets easy in our country, doesn't it? When you have an administration in charge that's kind of leading you down a path, what do most people do? They follow along like they're running behind the Pied Piper, don't they? People are afraid to stand up. People are afraid to say something, and pretty soon, when you take religion out of schools, who shows up? When you take the ability to read the Bible or pray in public, what happens? Where do they want? They want to put them in the prisons. They want to put them in the prisons. They want Bibles in prisons. Isn't that too late? It should tell you something. When you have administrations that's what they do, and we've had a long history of this. It didn't just happen all of a sudden. You know, it has been a long history of that kind of stuff. And when the people don't stand up and say, somebody stand in the gap and say, "I'm done here. I'm not doing this. I'm not." You know, and you may do that, guys or ladies, by walking into a restaurant and not be afraid to say, we're going to pray as a family. And we're going to pray. I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what they say. I don't care if somebody says anything. I don't care. We're going to pray. And that's standing in the gap. Because most people, they walk into a situation like that, and what do they want to do? I'm embarrassed. Are you kidding me? You're embarrassed? Are you walk into a place, or walk into the mall sometime and open your Bible and start reading your Bible in the mall. Not just reading out loud, just reading your Bible. Maybe in this town you won't have anybody push back. But there are places that you get pushback from. People would challenge you. Someone standing in the gap says, you know what, I'm going to do this anyway. I don't care. Because this is the right thing to do. This is a godly thing. This is what I need to do for me. And these people didn't do that. They went along for the ride, and these two people completely dominated, controlled. Even Obadiah was afraid. What does he do? Takes 50 prophets and puts them in one cave, puts 50 prophets in another one. Why don't they stand up to these guys? Because they can't. Because it went too far. And then God raises up somebody to stand in the gap. Okay? Right? Now, you can like a politician, not like a politician. I don't really care. But God's going to raise up somebody at some point, maybe He already has, to stand in the gap and say, enough's enough. This is over. We're going to start going, maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. Maybe that's coming down the road. But God will raise up someone in your life. Maybe it's in your family. For somebody to stand in the gap and say, you know what? This is enough. We're not going here anymore. We're not going to do this anymore. And sometimes the husband, sometimes the wife says, I'm finished. I'm finished doing this nonsense. We're not going to live like this anymore. We're going to stand up and we're going to do what's right and quit letting evil come into our house. Okay? So that's what you can learn from this guy. Think about it. He went to Ahab and he's alone. He's got no, he don't have a mentor. He don't have a guy. The only one he's got is who? God. God. Is it any different today? Is it any different today? If God calls you to stand in a place in front of evil, who do you know is going to be there? And how do you know? How do you know He's going to be there? How do you know for sure He's there?
Because His Word says so.
Because His Word says so. Thank you, Gerald. How else do you know? Because He's done it before. He stood with me before. And if you've never put yourself out there and stood in the gap and stood there it was just you and God, then you may not know. I know because I've had that happen. I've had to stand in the gap before and stand there with someone and say, this is wrong. This is not right. We're not going to do this anymore.
Because His Word says He will fight your battles for you.
Yes, it does. It does. But sometimes you need evidence, right? Don't we need evidence?
Right.
I need to know that He really showed up. So has that ever happened to you?
Yes.
Huh?
It happened to me.
Steve, has that ever happened to you?
Yes.
It's very traumatic when you have to stand in the gap and stand in front of evil, and evil is winning, isn't it? It can be very difficult, and it seems like evil's winning, and then all of a sudden God shows up and something dramatic happens, and the only explanation you have is that God showed up.
Right.
You can see that in the death of a loved one. Okay, you can see that, and I don't know. I mean, I listened to some stuff the other day about Phil Robertson. Y'all know Phil Robertson was the Duck commander, the guy over Duck Dynasty, and he died the other day. He's a member of the church. If you listen to his story, it's very dramatic, very dramatic. Baptized hundreds of people, had a story to tell. Was very, very opinionated in the way he told his story, but he was not afraid to stand in front of evil and say, "This is wrong." He did that on live television and got his clock cleaned over it. And you know what he said? I am never going to compromise the truth for my well-being. He made a comment about sexual sins and that kind of stuff. I'll leave it at that. You want to find it, just go find it. You find it easy. What he said. And it was a pushback all over the country, all over the world. People were pushing back. They called for him to be crucified. A&E kicked him off the show. Kicked him off the show. And he said, I am not going to compromise what I believe. Period. That's a man standing in the gap. Said, I'll stand in front of evil, and evil's not going to win. Not going to win. A couple of days later, A&E reinstated him because the groundswell of support was over with. Millions of people groundswell in support. That he had the right to say what he said, whether you like it or not. But the point here is that we can all be Elijahs in one form or another, standing in front of evil, standing in front of the error that's in our lives. Somebody had their hand up a while ago. Oh, okay, Vincent.
He made that movie too, The Blind.
Yeah.
You know, the name was kind of.
Yeah, it's you know, I mean, there's all kinds of those kind of guys out there. There's guys in here, I can name them in this place that have stood before evil and have you know, I mean, Bobby has to do that on a regular basis at times. You know, stand in front of evil and has to stand the gap and by himself. And he does that because God's helping him. And God's going to turn that out for good. Yeah, Cale.
Their podcast name is called Unashamed.
Unashamed.
And yeah. I think that's a great way of looking at how we need to look at how we present ourselves and our belief of Christ and God, is that we are unashamed of it. Yeah. We can't be embarrassed of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you be a little scared?
You can be scared, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be like, I'm wrong about it.
You know, I think Ahab was probably. I mean, Elijah's scared. I'm sure he's scared, a little intimidated. He's gonna, all these dead bodies.
But he's
around,
not.
He's got to go before.
He's not embarrassed.
No, he's not. He is not embarrassed. He is absolutely knows because he's raised a kid from the dead. All right. He's watched birds come and feed him meat and bread. You know. Come on. I mean, he's learned a thing or two. Doesn't mean he's going to stay faithful. I mean, he's going to stay committed. At some point, he's going to start running and hiding. But let's move on. I want to get this done. All right. Look, he said. So Ahab, verse 20. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people. All right. Now he's got the people's. He's got an audience. Not just Ahab now. Now he's got an audience. And this is what he says. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. God tells us the same thing. There are two ways you can go. All right? You can go down the broad path that leads to destruction, or you can go down the narrow path that leads to life. It's your choice. All right? There's another one. He said in another place in the book of Matthew, he said, don't lay up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust come and eat it up. Said you can only serve one master. If you have two masters, one you're going to love one and hate the other, or hate one and love the other. And he's talking about God and money, or God and stuff. And we live in a society of people that do what? Make money and wealth and stuff their God. We have whole religions that revolve around power and wealth and health. And they elevate that to be their God. And we'll say that, but that's what happens. And so, you know, and God said, and here he said, how long are you going to waver? How long are you going to flip-flop around between Baal and God? How long? And we have to ask ourselves, is that what I do? Do I come to church on Sunday and I'm just a churchgoer? Or am I striving with everything I have to learn how to be a disciple? Because they're two different entities. Churchgoers are going to go to hell. Disciples aren't. Got it? Churchgoers are people that play church. They go to church when it's convenient. They go to church because God told me I got to church. I'll go to church. You know, most of our kids are churchgoers. They go because they're made to, right? Now we grow them up to get to a point where we start to train them to be. That's what y'all are doing, is training your kids to be disciples. The elder's job is to train you to become disciples. That's what he says in Ephesians chapter 4. So we studied Friday night. You know, some to be apostles, some to be prophets, pastors, teachers, to train them for works of service. That's our job. Now, here he says, you're waffling between two opinions. Now, look at what he said. But the people said nothing. They stood there and took it and didn't say a word. Not one word. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But Baal has 450 prophets. All right? And Asherah has 850 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces, put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, man, that's good. Yeah, awesome. That's awesome. We'll do that. So they get busy and they start doing it. All right? The prophets of Baal, and I'm not going to read all this, but the prophets of Baal cut their animal up, put him on a thing, and they start jumping around, hooting around, and they start, acting like, well, it says at noon, in verse 27, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is God. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Can you see 450 guys jumping around an altar? 450 guys, a lot of guys. That's a lot of people. That's a lot, right? 450 of them? I mean, what's in here? About 50? Right? Time again. That's almost 10 times what's in here. You can't put this thing. We fed about 130 people last week for lunch, and we had to have that other curtain open. You can't even put 500 people in here to feed them at one time. Okay? That's a lot. And they're jumping around this altar, around this sacrifice, and they're hooting and hollering, and here's Elijah standing by himself, the man of the gap. Remember him? And he's over here like this, and he's laughing at him. And he's taunting him. Come on! Louder! Louder! He's sleeping! Oh, I know. He went on a trip. Maybe he's just deep in thought. Come on, y'all. And so they start screaming and hollering louder, and they start cutting themselves, because that's how they worship. They cut themselves. Now they got blood flowing everywhere. Now it's not just a sacrifice with blood all over. Now there's blood all over where they've done it. And can you imagine? They've done it until they're exhausted. Exhausted. Nothing happened. No fire, no God, no response, nothing. Okay? Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs. That's about 24 or 25 pounds. So it's not a real deep, but it's a trench around this altar. All right? It's a ditch, is what it is. He arranged the wood, cut the bull in pieces, then laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill your 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. I had one commentary I looked at. He said, where'd they get the water? This must be a joke. Well, that's not that far from the Mediterranean Sea. Okay? They get all the water they wanted there. And salt water wouldn't have mattered for what he wanted to do. He just wanted to get it wet. So they went and got 4 jars. All right? Poured it on the altar. They poured it on the sacrifice, poured it on the wood, poured it on, and he kept doing that until the ditch was full. That's a lot of water. Okay? Right, Jake? That's a lot of water. This thing's wet. How many of you have ever been camping and tried to camp after it's been raining and try to start wet wood?
It's impossible.
It's impossible. If you plan for it ahead of time and you bring something with you that's not wet, that you can start one, but it's really tough to start wet wood to make it burn, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now he's got all this water that they've dumped on top of this sacrifice, and so he said, "Tell them do it again. Do it a 3rd time." At verse 30, he said, "At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. I'm going to stop right here. You know how hot this fire is? It burned up the stones. 12 rocks. Big rocks. It burned them up. I had a fire at the shop one time. Not one of my buildings burned down, another time. I had fires a lot, seemed like. And it got to a set of cases that were against a wall, and they're magnesium. You know what happens to magnesium when it catches fire?
Not good.
It don't go out, it burns.
Huh?
It burns all the time. You can't put it out.
That's why we
You know what they did? They shot water on it. You know what it did? It blew up like a Roman candle on 4th of July. It was incredible. I thought, wow, man, that is awesome. Because it blew. This thing looked like a huge Roman candle. 5 days later, that fire's still burning. I covered it up. The only way you can put out a magnesium fire is you have to cover it with dirt. You have to smother it. 5 days later, I dug down, and it's still smoking. It's still burning. That's a hot fire. I forget how many thousands of degrees that magnesium burns at. This burned up the rocks. I've had a fire in a building that it wouldn't have burned a rock up. This is a hot fire. It burns up everything. It burned the altar. When it's done, there's nothing left but ashes. It's gone. Even the water, it licked the water up like gasoline. You know, what do you think the people? If you were standing there? What would you think? What would you think if you were standing there and you witnessed this? Because all these people are there. What would you think if you witnessed that? What would you think? Wow. Would you say, man, it must have been lightning? We've had a lot of fires lately because of all the famine. Maybe that's what it was, just a fire. You couldn't say that, could you? Because what you're looking at now, from what you looked at just a few minutes ago, is gone. The water's gone, the rocks are gone, the sacrifice is gone. It burnt the bones up. You know, I don't know. You know, you did mortuary stuff, right? How hot did it have to be to cremate a body? How hot? A couple thousand degrees for a while. And the animals, the sacrifice, they didn't debone this meat. Where are all the bones at? It burned them up. They're gone. Gone. How hot would it have to be to burn this? This is a bull, okay? You would say what, John? 800,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds, maybe, something like that. That's a lot of meat. That's a lot of animal. And they had it there, and it burned it all up. It's gone. God showed up. You ever seen God show up like that in your life? I'm not talking about he burned up a sacrifice. I'm talking about where God showed up, and what you thought was impossible became possible. You ever seen that happen? Where you've seen God show up in a situation and you look around and say, you know, you've been, and you see God show up and you say, oh my gosh, there is no other explanation than God showed up. God had to show up.
You call those miracles.
Yeah. What did you call this? This is a miracle, right? Elijah didn't do this. Ahab didn't do it. The prophets of Baal didn't do it. God did it. Now, what would be another miracle? If it started to rain. Right? What if it starts to rain? Look at what happens. He said, then Elijah, when all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God. Then Elijah commanded them, he tells the people, seize the prophets of Baal, don't let anyone get away. They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down into the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. Here's your hero of God. Okay? And Elijah said to Ahab, go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. See, it's going to rain now. He's already killed the 450 prophets. Probably the other 400, probably all of them he probably killed. All right? And this is what he said. So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, put his face between his knees. Go and look toward the sea, he told his servant. And he went and looked. There's nothing there. He goes 7 times. Says, go look. And then after the 7th time, he sees a cloud the size of a fist. And then it starts to rain. Starts to do exactly what Ahab said it was going to do. God caused it to rain. He burned up the sacrifice. They killed the prophets. And now it rained. Here's a hero. All right? Here's a hero. Look at what he said. And he said, so Elijah, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. I didn't stop to look and see how far that was, but it sounds like it's probably a good ways. He beat him there. He's in a chariot pulled by horses, and he beats him there. All right? Because he's going to go confront Jezebel. The worst of the worst. And next week we're going to look at what happens as we finish about this guy. What I wanted you to see, standing in the gap is tough. Standing in the gap is scary. Standing in the gap in front of the face of evil can absolutely make you lose your mind sometimes. But if you do this and you do it because God says, sometimes, I see a bunch of young parents in here. Sometimes standing in the face of evil to protect your children is you standing in the gap. All right? I'm never going to question what you do or how you do it. because that's your job to do. But don't question what I'm going to do when I'm doing my thing, how I'm going to stand in the gap. Because I've got things I've got to do too. And if we become a church of people that are willing to stand in front of evil and confront it, okay, confront it heads on, then you know what? We've got a great mentor we can follow in Elijah. All right? Here's a great hero, man. All right? Well, we're going to see a different side of him next week. All right? We're going to see a scared, terrified side. All right? And then God's going to confront him, and God's going to get on him. All right? So we'll see you guys next week.